All right. I believe we're recording. Let me just look at this real quick. Hello, hello. All right. Okay, so welcome to Anatomy. Um, I'm still trying to figure out this room. This room is new. There's a few interesting things about this room. One of them is I have to remember to be near this gooseneck because or else you won't be able to hear me. But the one thing I don't remember is how to adjust the lights. Give me one quick minute. There we go. Okay, my name is Dr. Andres Carrillo. You guys can call me Professor C. That's just the easiest way for Carrillo. If you're not enrolled in the course, again, there's my email, so you have access to it now. But we will need to speak during the break today. Okay, I am an adjunct faculty member, therefore I do not have office hours. So the only thing we can do is maybe if time permits, schedule a Zoom appointment. So that's why my office hours are going to be by appointment only. Okay, so this is a lab and lecture course combo. So if you're trying to add and we didn't attend the lab this week, you guys are gonna have to figure ways to make them up. So we'll talk about that again during the break. So for this course is run by multiple instructors. I am one of them, and Professor Sanders is the other one. I will be running the lectures. Professor Sanders and I run the labs. So you will see either one of us at either one. And what I want to do real quick is talk about uh, the the Canvas site, because the Canvas site is going to be a very, very important piece that you guys need to be able to navigate. Okay. So the Canvas site, here it is. Let me hide this. Um, so here's, no, 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 here. I'm going to show you mine. Okay, so here's mine, view a student. Let me pull that up. So this is where you're going to be able to find the contents that you need. Okay. The key tab that is going to be really important for you guys to understand where most of the materials are is going to be the modules tab. Okay. I already opened up the Canvas site. So depending on which section you're in, you should have seen some to-do list to prepare for our lectures, prepare for labs. I'm going to be posting things on this. So one heads up is to make sure your emails are linked appropriately because sometimes I don't know why. Some of you guys got an email from my personal email, so it wasn't linked appropriately. I apologize for that. But depending on which email you have for your notifications will depend where the announcements will go. But I would suggest you check this very often. So one thing you're going to be able to see is you're going to be able to download the syllabus. There's my syllabus for my Wednesday lab. There's a different syllabus for each one, but they pretty much have the same information. One thing that you will need is you're going to need to make sure you have access to the textbook. So it is a free online text course. There's the link. You guys can click on the link to access the textbook. You can download it as a PDF. And if you want, you can even purchase it. I think it's like $50 if you want them to send you a printed hard copy, if that is what you prefer. Okay, starting next week, I need you guys to bring your own index cards, and I want them to be 3 by 5 inch, this size. Index cards, okay? I won't be accepting sheets of paper. They have to be index cards because this is how I will be keeping track of attendance for you every single day in lecture. So starting next week, just go get some index cards. There's a bunch of you in lab. You can buy a pack of 100. They're like $1.50 at Target, and distribute them amongst your lab groups. So you will need at least 15 for in-class attendance. Okay. You're going to need Scantrons. Those are available at the bookstore. For the lab, we're posting the labs weekly, or you should have gotten that instruction from your lab instructor. We're posting those materials weekly, so those are available to you. What you do need to purchase are disposable lab gloves, okay? So that's a must. And then your instructors will have discussed the lab coat and dissection kits, okay? These are things that you need for this course, all right? What's going to be important is as you scroll down, you're going to see you're all the way towards the bottom, you're going to see how you're going to be graded for this course. So here we have lecture exam 1, lecture exam 2, lecture exam 3, lecture exam 4. What I don't want to get, and I'm letting you know this right now, because I'm not going to respond to it. I don't want to get what's on tomorrow's exam. Because what's on exam 1, it's right here. It's telling you what chapters, what topics. This is what this is for. So I need you to make sure you peruse this, you understand this. You will have lecture quizzes. They're going to be posted on Canvas. Your first one will be available tomorrow, and it's due next week before lecture. Okay, you're going to be able to take your online quizzes as many times as you want. But you need to, it's up to you to get the full credit. So you're going to be able to take them as many times as you want, and they're going to be on the topic that we discussed. For example, the one that's going to open up tomorrow will be what we discussed today. So that'll be your lab quizzes. Not lab quizzes, lecture quizzes. Your lab quizzes will be posted on Canvas as well. Your first one is going to be available next week. All right. Here's the material that's on each lab exam and what you need to get the grades. And what's more important is the schedule. So here's our lecture schedule. Okay, so by week 5, a lot of you guys are already going to hate me. What's week 5? Our first lecture exam. And to make things even more challenging, is this lecture meets once a week. So that means when you come on September 18th, you will have a lecture exam, and you have to come back after the lecture exam for the second part of lecture, because we only meet once a week. That's the only way the schedule is going to go. You can see when after lecture exam 1, I'm going to kick you guys all out. We come back. I'll tell you what time we come back. And then we're going to pick it up talking about muscle tissues right after that exam. All right. So that's the way that the only way the schedule can work for a course of this caliber that meets once a week. So there's their lecture exam and then our lab exam. So, I mean, our lab schedule. So our lab schedule is different based on the lab day, right? A lot of students on Monday are all excited because they have 2 holidays, but that means you're going to cram 2 other labs into one day. So it comes with a price. So just heads up, okay? So depending on your lab schedule, just take a look at it. You know what to bring. You know when the lab exams are scheduled as well, okay? So please, please make sure you look at the syllabus. You understand some of the important topics, and it's actually going to be part of your lecture 1 quiz. Your lecture 1 quiz are going to include questions to make sure you read and understand the syllabus. Okay, so just heads up there. Let's see, what other questions, any questions that I have as of now? Do you guys have any questions? Yes, sir. It's going to be primarily all lecture material. Okay, so the question was, is the lecture exam going to be focused mainly on the lecture material? It will be. When you go through the syllabus, what you're going to find is when you go to modules, week 1, okay? So this is stuff for today. So it tells you what we want you to do for lecture and what I want you to do for lab, okay? So these study guides, a lot of students don't pay attention to these, but these might be some of your questions, like what are the 3 planes of the human body, right? You can see that question right here. We're going to talk about that in lecture. You're going to hear me in lecture. I don't have time to cover all of these. And I'm going to say, review your reading guide, because this is fair game. So the reading guides are really your study guides to prepare for the exam. I might give you most examples, but not all. Okay, just because it's a time thing. But this is all pretty much, if you pay attention, this is going to follow the lecture format of today. So this one's 3 pages. It's 2 pages because a lot of it's just the labeling the regions of the body. Okay. So a lot of it will be mainly from lecture, but about 5 to 10% of it will come straight from this reading guide. So I expect you to be on top of it and do both. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, so tomorrow you'll see week 2. Yeah, so you'll have at least 1 week ahead of time, right? You'll have at least 1 week ahead of time to see the material. So tomorrow will be week 2, and then yeah, you'll have from Wednesday till the next week to have access to those materials. Any other questions? Yes. Any color, so long as they're 5x3 index cards, please. It doesn't matter. It's just that I have to file a bunch of them, so that's why they have to be. That's why I care about the same size. The color doesn't matter, right? So that way I can later on, if something happens and I accidentally marked you absent, I dropped you from the class, and then I look at it, I'm like, oh, you were here. My bad. We'll fix it. My lectures, I failed to mention this, they are recorded. Okay, so I don't know if you noticed this, but one of the things I did was open up Zoom. So Zoom is recording it, and I will post everything that happens today. I will post it, the recording, to Canvas, okay? So the caveat is sometimes Canvas doesn't work and the recording doesn't happen. That rarely happens. And I'll let you know, like, sorry guys, it didn't happen today. But it rarely happens. That's if the Canvas ends up going down, which occasionally happens. Okay. So this mic is for you guys can hear me. This mic is so Canvas can hear, Zoom can hear me. So even though you might not be able to hear me while I'm over here, Zoom still recording me. Okay. So that's the objective. So you'll get these recordings. You can access them after class for review. Any other questions? That being said, if you ask questions, you will be recorded. Don't be shy. You're going to ask questions. You're going to see me pause the recording at times. And if you're not comfortable with being recorded during that pause session, you can ask your questions. Okay. Any other questions? So you will have a syllabus quiz popping up starting tomorrow. Week 2 will be available starting tomorrow. Okay. So we can keep up and stay on track. All right. Let's see, what else did I need to say about this? So here's where you're going to be able to download the slides. These are the exact slides that we're going to be working on today. All right, so let me do that. Let me do that. There it goes. Okay, so again, there's my info. Feel free to email me. If you do email me through Canvas, heads up, if you want to include a document, like this is what my like this is what I have so far. This is what I've been working on. If you want to show me something, sometimes Canvas doesn't send the attachments, right? So just if you're going to send an attachment, send it to this one, right? So send it to the direct email because that's how I'll get it. Just a heads up. Okay, so what you're going to see is the way that I do lectures is more of a chalk talk. I'm going to have images. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to ask you questions, and we're just going to write our notes directly on the screen. So you're going to see these notes recorded, and you know what to write down on it, right? You know what key points are. So this is why it's important that you bring these lecture slides to class. You can bring them as a printed out copy, digital copy, I don't care. They're available to you every week so that we can take notes together and complete the learning objectives as a group. All right. So we're going to jump right into it. We're going to jump right into the class. So this is for lecture. All right. So keep in mind, before I move on, that the lecture exams, the lecture quizzes is going to be from the actual lecture and the reading guide. Those are your two resources to do well for what I expect of you to perform on lecture quizzes, lecture exams. The lab is that study guide, the practical study guide. Okay, that's for lab. So they are both the same course. They're two different things and they're coming from two different sources. So it's important that in your mind, for lecture exams, lecture quizzes, reading guide, lecture recordings. For lab, the activities that we worked on, and that practical guide, study guide. All right. We have to review levels of organization. In biology, in science, we think of things, especially when it comes to living things, that they are arranged in a hierarchy, starting from the smallest. The smallest part that we are focusing on are going to be our molecules, okay? Our atoms. That's the molecular level. Everything is made of atoms. It's made of stuff. It's made of carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, sodium, whatever. We are made of a bunch of atoms, okay? And then as it gets bigger, we go to large molecules. As a heads up, in this class, I'm going to start using some chemical symbols and chemical symbols and chemical formulas. For example, if I just write this, O2, what is that? And not only is it oxygen, but it's oxygen that's usually in gas form, breathable oxygen, okay? What if I write this? Sodium, okay? This is what I mean by the molecular level. This is some of the atoms, ions. This is an ion because it has a charge to it, and that charge happens to be a +1 charge. Okay, this is going to be important when you get into physio. And I know there's no prereqs of chemistry, but it always concerns me when students do not understand these basic topics getting to those higher level courses. For this class, I expect you to know this chemical. Let's see who knows this one. Glucose. Why is glucose important? It provides energy to the body. In the medical world, why is glucose, measuring glucose, important? It helps control insulin levels. What did you say? High glucose levels is the disease diabetes, right? So we're going to understand some basic chemicals, what things are made of, because it's part of what builds the human body. Okay. Then we're going to get to the macromolecule level. Macromolecules are a little bit convoluted molecules. These are molecules that are big. These are molecules that are big. They're made of many small, like this is a micromolecule. They're made of many small ones. For example, starches, like carbohydrates. Some carbohydrates, large ones, I should be more specific, a large carbohydrate is a macromolecule. Starches can be made of many glucose molecules. So carbohydrate is a very important macromolecule of life. This is one that we actually consume when we eat our foods to help build us. Who can give me the other main example of macromolecules that we consume other than carbohydrates? What's another one? Fats. They are lipids. Oils, fats, animal fat, plant fat, shortening, all that stuff. Lipids. We need that macromolecule to sustain us. What's the other one? Proteins. They're made of amino acids. So many amino acids will make a protein. And we get protein from pretty much all the foods that we eat, whether it's plant or animal material. These are the main three that give us calories. Calories are the essential parts that we can burn as fuel to maintain our metabolism, to maintain life. There's another macromolecule that we often forget about that is very important. And the fourth one is there are nucleic acids. Does anyone know what nucleic acids, why they're important? What do we use nucleic acids for? Right? So this is the building block of DNA and RNA. And those are very important in maintaining life. So you will see one of the reading guide points are what are the four major macromolecules of life. They are the four, and they are like in this level, the molecules. Okay, the molecules. I forgot one important molecule. This is embarrassing, but we should know what that one is. What is that one? H2O, water. Okay. When you start putting macromolecules together, they start to become structures of cells, and then they develop cells. So your cell level, the cells are what we call the fundamental units of life. So this is the basic units of life. Okay. Cells. What type of cells are you familiar with? What type of cells do we have in our body that people investigate, people study, people measure? RBCs, red blood cells, white blood cells, right? Platelets. Those are all different types of cells. What other type of cells do people like to study, look at? Muscle cells? What is it? Cancer cells? Nervous cells? Epithelial, skin cells, right? Cells are made up of many, many macromolecules that will form organelles. Cells are made of organelles. So organelles make up cells. Macromolecules make up organelles. So again, you can see how it's getting bigger. Macromolecules. More than one organelle makes a cell. More than one cell makes the next level. So when you have two or more cells, you have this T word. Two or more cells that work together is what makes tissues, right? So I need you to know the basic definition. Two or more cells make up a tissue. Two or more organelles make up a cell. So two or more cells makes up one tissue. When you start to combine two or more tissues, what do they make? Two or more tissues, a definition of what? An organ, right? So some of the organs, your heart, your liver, your brain, spinal cord, each bone in your body, each bone is an organ. Why? Because each bone is made of two or more tissues. That defines a single organ. Okay. What about when we have two or more organs? Organ system. Give me an example of an organ system. I heard reproductive system, right? Two or more is an organ system. What's another organ system? Respiratory system. Nervous system. What is it? Circulatory. We're going to call that the cardiovascular system. The heart, the blood vessels, all of those things make up one organ system. And in our case, I believe I should have looked this up. We're studying 12 organ systems in this class. And those 12 organ system makes one organism, makes a human. Okay, so we're going to be breaking it down in this level, understanding what makes a cell, what makes a tissue, what makes an organ. We have to understand those levels. Today, all we're doing to today's lecture is understanding some basic anatomical structures, some terms, and we're going to start to investigate the cells as part of today's lecture. Okay. So this is from another textbook. So again, when I'm talking about the chemical level, don't forget things like water. Glucose is a good one. The big molecules. This one's hemoglobin. Where do we find hemoglobin, folks? Where do we find that in your red blood cells? That is a large many proteins to make a hemoglobin. That's why it's a macro molecule. Okay. The cell, we're going to look at the cell today. Once we get 2 macromolecules, so that's 1 macromolecule. Here's 2 macromolecules. And then when you arrange them together, here's one of those. Now there's a bunch of them. They start to make organelles. And organelles are the individual parts that make up the cell. So 2 or more organelles are going to make up a cell. That's very important. And then once we have the cell, 2 or more cells make a tissue, and so on. 2 or more tissues makes an organ. 2 or more organs makes an organ system. And 2 or more organ systems makes the individual. Please keep in mind, I'm going to put O systems for organ systems. Please keep in mind that it goes smaller than this. There are things smaller than the atom level. There's the submolecular. People in physics study that, but we're not interested in, we're not going to focus on that in anatomy. There's things beyond the organismal level, like populations, the ecosystems, the ecology, the biosphere. We're only focusing on this range, just these 6 levels of hierarchy. Okay. So when it comes to an exam, I expect you to be able to answer questions like this. What's the first one? Make a tissue. The next one, organs. The last one, you're going to expect questions very similar to this on our lecture, exams, and quizzes. Here are those 4 major macromolecules of life that we were talking about. These are the ones that we consume to help us get our energy, right? And to help us make the building blocks of life. Your carbs. These are the ones that come in forms of fiber, starches, and sugar. Those are your carbohydrates. Okay, your carbohydrates are important. Glucose, sucrose, glycogen, these are all carbohydrates. We consume them. What our body does is it converts it into one of its smallest forms, glucose, and we use glucose as a fuel source. Does anybody know why when we break down glucose, what is the fuel source your cells break that down into? ATP. So this is the molecule that is your energy source for your cells. So when you break it down, you're going to break it. That is what I mean by fuel. You're going to create ATP, which is used for the cells to do the functions that they need to do to keep the organism alive. Proteins. Proteins are made of 2 or more amino acids. Amino acids are important. Amino acids make the building blocks of cells. Okay, so cells are made of many amino acids that form different proteins. Proteins will make up enzymes. Proteins will make up channels that allow the cell to get water, to get things in and out of it. Okay. Proteins will make messengers. They can make hormones. Proteins are made of a lot of material. So it's important for us to consume proteins so we can break them down to amino acids so that they can be the building block of cells. Has anybody heard of a term called a complete amino acid meal? That's important. There are about 19 essential amino acids. That means there's 19 different amino acids that we absolutely need to build our bodies. Not all foods will have all 19. If a food has all 19, it is considered a complete amino acid. And it always blows my mind when we look at different cultures around the world, how many simple foods make up a complete amino acid. Like for my family, the most simplest of things makes up a complete amino acid. Rice and beans, right? It's pretty much in every Mexican household at some point. You're gonna get rice and beans, and that makes up a complete amino acid. You look at all different countries, some basic foods will make up those building blocks of life. Lipids, these are the fats and oils we get from our foods, sorry. Right, oils come from plants, nuts. We cook with a lot of oils. Fats are the solid stuff, like when a steak is marbled, or shortening that we get from vegetables. Lipids are important. These can also be converted to a fuel source, right? We can burn fat. And we're going to break it down into fatty acids, which we're eventually going to turn into APT. This is slower. This is a slow fuel source. So it takes a while to burn the fat away from our cells. It takes time. Our nucleic acid is not a fuel source, but is important to make the DNA, which are your blueprints, and the RNA, which are the instructions how to build you. So they are very important building blocks that create the DNA and RNA. And we get those from our foods. We actually have better luck getting this from raw food. So you have much easier access to nucleic acids when you consume like a salad where it's raw foods, right? So things to think about. Organ systems have an overarching purpose in life. If I were to ask you this, what is the name of the organ system that is made of hair, skin, and nails? What is that called? The integumentary system. Some people call this the skin, but that's not 100% correct. Okay, because the integumentary system is made of many organs. So it's 2 or more organs. Okay, and guess what? The skin, that is only one organ. Your skin is your largest organ in the body. So that's only one of them that make up the integumentary system. Why do we have skin? What's the use of it? What's its purpose? What are you going to tell me? Give me one. Correct. So it keeps you hydrated. You do not want to lose the water to the environment. Your muscles would dry out really fast if it wasn't for the skin. What else? Give me another reason. What's another purpose of the skin? What is it? Regulates heat. Excellent. We say thermo for temperature. Regulation. When it's hot and you're outside, what do you start to do with your skin? Sweat. When it's really cold, what does your skin do? Does anybody know? The skin doesn't shiver. Why does it yeah, the goosebumps. It becomes blue because it's changing the blood flow to your skin so you don't lose your body heat to the environment. Thermoregulation regulates heat. Give me two more and then we'll move on. Protects from what? Good. Okay, because one of the things that's going to get you no points on the exam, and someone's going to do this, so pay attention. Someone's just going to write protection, and they're not telling me what it's protecting it from. Microorganism, it prevents you from diseases, right? It doesn't allow the bacteria to get to you. It's preventing a shield almost. You said from the environment, it prevents you from abrasion. Does anybody know what that word means? Abrasion? Like when I bump up against your skin can take some of that force, right? It protects you from UV light. She said environment, so those kind of all count as this. It prevents your muscles from coming in contact from pure UV. Speaking of light, what else does the skin do? Does anybody know what your skin does with light? Okay, there's one more important one. I heard it. Vitamin D. Your skin uses the light to produce vitamin D. Without that, you wouldn't be able to process calcium well. So you need to get some sunlight in your life, believe it or not. Okay. So you can see that this system has multiple purposes. So I can ask you, name one function of the integumentary system. Name two organs of the integumentary system. This is the only one that's on here. So what's the other one? That's where you're going to pick up your book and let me know. Okay. Which one's this one? Muscles. We need to be specific. What type of muscle? So this is it's actually your skeletomusculature. Skeletal muscular system, because you have more than one type of muscle in your body. Okay, the skeletal muscular system only includes the skeletal muscles, the tendons that hold those muscles together. Folks, each muscle is a different organ. Your deltoid is one organ. Your biceps brachii is another organ. Your brachioradialis is another organ. So each of these muscles is one organ. How about this question? What is your skeletal muscular system for? What does it do? Movement. We got to be careful with the word movement because there's actually two things it can do. Actually multiple things it can do. One of the things is locomotion. That is literally, moving things, like moving yourself from one location to the other. Like if you pick an apple, you're moving the apple closer to you. Okay. Here's another one that has to do with movement. You need support. Just standing up straight. You're using muscles and your bones just to stand up straight. No muscles, you're not going to stand up straight. So just support. The other movement is your skeletal muscles are important for internal organs. When you walk around, when you go for a walk, you help move the blood back to your heart. You help your internal organs move things around. So moving it back to your heart. That's important. That's why the doctors tell you to get 10,000 steps every day to help with circulation. People who don't walk later in life, they get poor circulation. The other thing that your muscles do is think about when you sit on that toilet. You recruit your skeletal muscles to get stuff moving, right? It helps your internal organs move things around. So be careful when you just say moving, okay? There's a lot of things that moving means, and here are good examples for the skeletal muscular system. I think we have one or two more. Kidneys, urinary bladder. These are two different organs. What system are they part of? Urinary. And I'm old school, so I'm probably going to call it renal. They're both the same. Okay, this one. Let's pay attention to this one. Let's see what we get. What does the renal system do? Okay, gets rid of waste and salt and filtrates water. What I don't want to see is this. Everyone does this. It does filtration. I don't know what that means. Okay. And you said filtrations of water, and you said filtration of salt and waste, right? Of the blood. Filtration of blood to regulate water, salt, waste. Your kidneys are so important. We cover renal system. It's quite remarkable with how they work, how small they are, and what they do for the blood. Your kidneys actually take up like 10% of all the energy in your body, and they're really tiny. That's how important they are. Don't just say filtration. Tell me what it's filtering and what parts of it can filter. Which one's this one? Heart, blood vessels. Good. Our cardiovascular system. Why do we call it cardio? Because it includes the heart. What are your vascular organs? What are some of your vascular organs? Veins, arteries, your venules, your arterioles, and the capillaries. Very good. Lots of organs. What are they responsible for? The movement of blood throughout your body. Movement of blood throughout. It's transporting the blood, and the blood transport nutrients, oxygen, waste, water. I mean, the list goes on. Ions, vitamins, minerals, all that stuff is being transported by the cardiovascular system. Okay, you can see we don't have time to do them all. You're going to do the rest of them. Make sure you review the reading guide because we only did 4, only have time for 4, but there are 12. Okay, so things I can ask you is what organ belongs to this system? Right? What is the function of that organ system? And I'm only looking for basic stuff, okay? We're not looking for every single detail. Look for the primary function and just focus on that. Primary function. Okay, you're going to see these symbols. This means that you are going to write on your index card. Okay. Let me make this very clear because it is important that you fill these correctly every single time. Those that are not filled correctly, you will see will be discarded, and that's going to count as an absence. You get enough absences, you will be dropped from the course. What I need from you, every single card is your name, and it must be first and last name that's on the roster. I apologize, but that's how I have to, if it's a common name that I don't know, I might mark you absent. Okay. You need to tell me when your lab day and time is. Whose lab is on Monday at 7:35? Show your hands. That's what you're gonna put. Monday, 7:35. Whose lab is on Tuesday, 7:35? That's what you're gonna write down. Whose lab is on Wednesday, 4:25? That's what you're gonna write down. And today's date. Okay, that's what you're gonna put on the top every single time of your index cards. And then I'm gonna ask you questions that I expect you to work on, like these. All you need to do is write the answer. That's all I need you to do. Okay, so here, let's give this a go. All right, so what are the 4 macromolecules? Let's start there. Carbs, lipids, proteins, and so what can they compose? That means what can they make? Carbohydrate can make a starch, can make a sugar, right? Lipids, fats and oils. Proteins, I may have not written that one down, but I know I mentioned them. What is it? Technically, what's the proteins that are in rice and beans? But I did mention that they make up enzymes. They make up hemoglobin. They make up the parts of cells, right? They make the individual parts of us. They're the building blocks of cells. Nucleic acids, what do they make up? DNA and RNA. Look at this question. The liver belongs to which organ system? Digestive system is number 1. Any others? What is it? Endocrine? The lymphatic. It's responsible for detoxifying your blood. Yeah, yeah. Some people submit multiple cards. That's all right too. Oh, I blocked that off. Supposed to hide this. Okay, so it belongs to multiple systems. Okay, it's responsible for blood sugar regulation, which is why it's sometimes associated with the endocrine system. But the main one is this one. The main one is digestive. Some organs belong to more than one system. Planes of the body. There are 3 major planes of the human body. Okay. Before I move on, this person is an anatomical position. You may not see that right. Anatomical position. Look at the way that this person's palms are facing. The palms face forward or backward? Forward. Your tippy toes face forward. Your feet about shoulder width apart. This is anatomical position. So when you say the back of the hand, this is the back of the hand. This is the front of the hand. The back of the forearm, the front of the forearm. Anatomical position is crucial for people to understand. Okay. There are 3 planes. This is important for imaging. Like when we take an MRI, a CAT scan, X-ray, to look at what is going on inside your patients. One of the planes is the frontal plane. The frontal plane is this purple one. And you can see what it does. It gives you a front view of that person. This is what the doctors would typically take a chest ray to look at, a chest X-ray to look if there's something going on, if anything's broken, there's too much fluids in your lungs. That is a frontal view. It cuts the person like a book in this direction. So when you look at it, you're looking at the front view. Sagittal. Ugh. In labs, spelling matters. In lecture, spelling does not. But in lab, look at that one. Sagittal. Many people are going to put Saggittal. Okay, spelling matters. Sagittal plane. Sagittal plane cuts the person in this blue. So it's like down the center. It could be off to the center, but what it does is it gives you a side view of the person. So remember, a sagittal, side view. Frontal, front view. Transverse or cross section. Transverse is this one in green. This is like the magician cutting his assistant in half. When you do that type of cut, what you get is you get a top view. Okay, so you have frontal view for front view, transverse plane for top view, sagittal plane for side view. Okay, so you can understand how are you inspecting your patient's internal organs. All right. Planes are a little bit hard. Okay. So what we're going to do as a group, we're going to do the frontal view of this mug. And in this mug, we have to think, what is the posterior? What does posterior mean? The rear end, the back. And we're going to use the handle. That is that cup's rear end. That is the back side. So if we do a frontal view, that means I'm going to cut the cup down this way. So I can look at this cup from the front view, from a frontal point of view. So what is that cup going to look like? Here's the walls of the cup. And here's the wall. Okay. So when I cut this cup down in a frontal view, this is what I'm going to be looking at when I actually look at the frontal view plane. This is actually a hard thing that people struggle with. What is it visually going to look like when I cut the object in half? And one reason I'm doing this is if you guys are ever interested in going into certain like surgery practices, even as nurses, there is a test that'll show a shape on its side and it'll ask you, what is the front view? What is the sagittal view of this shape? And you literally have to draw it out because you have to understand how things look from 2D to 3D so you can appropriately do surgery on your patients. I forget what that exam is called, but there is one. I promise you that. Transverse. This one's going to give you a top view. So to do a top view, we're going to cut it this way. So if I get a saw or a knife, slice it in half that way, we're going to look at it from the top. Okay. So what is it going to look like from the top? We're going to have the inner wall of the cup, the outer wall of the cup, And somewhere floating over here, there's the handle. And you're going to see that in some of the, especially like when you're looking at someone's arms, you're going to see that little part is kind of floating off to the side. Now, what I want you to do on your card, for me, what does the sagittal view look like? What is that one going to look like? I'm going to pause it and we'll continue from there. Here we go. Remember, we're getting a knife and we're cutting it in this direction. And then we're opening it up like a book. So what is that going to look like? Well, that's going to look very similar to a frontal plane, except except we're also going to have the handle. Okay, because we're cutting it from a very different plane. The good thing is I need you to understand the planes on the human, not so much a mug. But this is an activity that you will see if you're considering, again, certain surgical procedures on your patients, because you're going to have to look at this. You're going to have to look at one of those and understand, where do I need to make an incision? Where do I need to remove that mass from? Where do I need to put stitches in? And it's all 3D from a 2D point of view. Okay. Anatomical position is important. This is what a person looks like in anatomical position. Cannot emphasize that enough. Look at the way that the face forward, palms forward, tippy toes forward, no more than shoulder width apart. This one right here, is that the right or left arm? Are you sure? Always from the point of view of your patient. Always. So which one is it? It is the right. Folks, don't be the doctor that amputates the wrong leg. I say that, but that's no joke. I see way too many people go into surgery and their partners will write this leg, not this leg, because doctors forget this. I'm going to age myself. Wayne's World, who's seen it? Who's actually seen it? Raise your hands, because I'm aging myself. Wayne's World, right? One of those major actors, the doctor screwed up and operated on the wrong coronary artery. He was like, oh, this is my right. I'm going to operate on this one. Guess what? It was his left coronary artery. Always in point of view of your patient. Clearly, that person lost his license, was fired, is never going to get hired again as a doctor, sued for probably millions of dollars, but don't be that person. Okay. Right according to your patient. Always, always according to your patient. Okay, let me ask you this. What part of the body is this? Oh, that's a bad color. Let me try this. What part of the body is this one that I'm outlining in green? That is the thigh. Don't call that the leg. That is not the leg. That is the thigh. Which one is the leg? This one is the leg. What part of the body is this? The arm. What part of the body is this one? The forearm. Don't call it lower arm. upper arm. That one breaks my heart. Arm, forearm. By the way, those are common terms. These are and students get mad at me. They're like, why do I have to know both? Well, you're going to have a patient who is 10 years old who broke their arm. And you're going to read the chart and it's going to say there was a break in the antebrachial portion of the patient. You're not going to tell his mother, oh, it's in the antebrachial region. You're going to be like, what the hell? You need to know both. You need to know the common name and the anatomical name. A patient has fallen off a motorcycle. They tore a muscle on their axillary region and broke bones in the coxal, sacral, acromial, and fibular regions. There's intense bleeding in their frontal and mental regions. This is the chart that you just got. Now you have to explain it to this person's mother. What just happened? Let's see how we do. What is the axillary region? The armpit area. What is the coxal? Yeah, like the tailbone area. What is the sacral? Lower back. Acromial. Very good. So this is where they broke bones, right? Oh, nope. Sorry. I read that wrong. This is where they tore a muscle. And they broke bones all the way to their fibular. Where's the fibular region? The leg, but it's, believe it or not, the lateral leg. We'll talk about what that means, but it's in the leg. This is where they broke bones. The frontal region. Where's your frontal region? Your forehead. Where's their mental region? I will never forget this because I got this wrong when I took anatomy. Pisses me off every single time I read this. It's the chin. Yeah, cranial region. Not mental. That's what I put. Brain. Mental. Frontal. Okay. Folks, this is just an example of how I'm going to ask you. We do not have time to go over all these. Your reading guide, and I apologize about this, and I promise you, there's a reason for this. Your reading guide has about 26 of these terms that you need to know. Some of them are pretty simple. Femoral region, plantar region, bottom of the foot, palmar region. Where's your digital? Your fingers. I always think computers, right? But yes, make sure you look at your reading guide to know those because those are all going to be fair game for the lecture and quiz and exams, okay? There's a lot of them, and I literally include this picture so you can label them, all right? It's a very clear one in the textbook. This is what you will see on an exam. Quiz. Where is the olecranal region? It is like that region, the back of the elbow, the pointy part of your elbow, not the front. What is the front of the knee called? Patellar. The bottom of the foot, you guys said it. The side of the head. Temporal, very good. Ends of the fingers. Digital. The one I'm going to tell you right now, because students get this one confused. The back of the knee. And that's the problem, is it starts with the P, so does the front of the knee. Popliteal. Ugh. Ugh. There's so many of these. You're like, where did they, that one, I have no idea where that came from. By the way, if I haven't mentioned so, those of you guys who can speak Spanish may end up having a heads up. Okay. Because one of them, for example, brachial. Where's your brachial region? Your arm. What's the word for arm in Spanish? Where do you think that word came from? Brachial. Brazo. Forearm is antebrachial. Antes del brazo. That's literally what it means. Okay. So you guys are going to see that because it is one of the things about anatomy, it is a Latin-based language. Okay. Anatomical relationships. So this is describing positions. I thought that was a fire alarm. Superior. This literally means above. Please note for superior, pay attention to this because someone's going to get frustrated with this. That only applies to what we call the axial. Axial only. You do not say your patient has an injury superior to the knee. That is wrong. You can say they have an injury superior to the heart. So superior only applies to axial descriptions. Distal applies to appendicular. Distal means away and away from the body. That's what you use to describe here and here. So you can say your patient has an injury distal, because it's further away from the body, distal to the elbow. Those two, I think, are the toughest ones. You got to remember when to use superior, when to use distal. Superficial. This is at the surface. You'll say, oh, it's a superficial wound. That means it barely only broke the skin. That's at the superficial. The superficial. Medial. What do you think that one means? Middle, but be specific, midline. So that is this region right here. Oh, sorry, I meant to do yellow. More middle. So more towards the middle. Posterior. You told me what that one means. Which one's that? The backside. Okay. I only told you what the backside is. Guess what? There's a front side. Guess what? There's a below. So when we talk about superior, a superior means above. What is the opposite of above? We don't say superior, we say what? Inferior, below. And remember, this one is axial only. We say distal for away from the body. What was the opposite of distal? Proximal. That means closer to body. And that is also, oh, not axial, the other one, appendicular. Superficial is at the surface. What's the opposite of superficial? That wound is deep. Deep. That one's to the bone. Went all the way deep inside. Medial is towards the midline. What is the opposite of medial? Lateral. That means the side, like the outer edge side. Posterior is the word we use for backside. What's the front side word? Anterior. Okay, so you need to be able to describe the relative positions of things using these terms. Let's give it a try, shall we? I'm going to pause this. You don't have to write this on your card, but I'm going to give you guys a minute or two to talk about this with your peers. Okay, so talk about it. How would you describe the relationship? And the key thing is it's between the two structures. So the first example, the muscles are blank to the integument. The integument is the skin. So the muscles relative to the skin are what? The muscles are deep. They're below the skin. The shoulder is blank to the elbow. What you guys put? The shoulder. Proximal. The shoulder is closer to the body than the elbow is. Does that make sense? So it's relative to the two terms. This next one upsets me, but this is the answer. The thumb is blank to the pinky finger because anatomical position. The thumb is lateral. The thumb is lateral to the pinky. Where are your metacarpals? Your hand bones, the ones in your palm, or your metacarpal, your carpal, sorry. Your wrist. Okay, let's see if we can get this. The metacarpals, anatomical position, are blank to the carpals. Distal, because it's appendicular, not axial. Don't say inferior, superior for those. The eyes are blank to the chin. Superior is your best answer there. If someone put lateral, I'd give it to you. Sometimes it can be more than one. Okay, so this is how I expect you to be able to answer some of these questions. We're going to take our first break because I talk too much. And I want you to come back in 10 minutes. Okay, so another topic that we need to familiarize ourselves are some of the major body cavities. Okay. And you're going to see that this gets a little confusing because there's body cavities and body cavities and body cavities. For example, okay, we're going to start with all of these body cavities shown here, all of them. They are on the anterior side of the human body, but there's another word for the anterior side, and that is your ventral side. So this is the ventral cavity, all of them. All of those areas in blue, purple, is the ventral cavities. That is where a lot of your soft organs reside. Then you have this cavity that I'm going to outline in green. It's right above the diaphragm. So all of that in green is your thoracic cavity. So that's the cavity in your thoracic cage, in your rib cage. And in your thoracic cavity, you have two major cavities. One that holds the heart. The one that holds the heart, pericardial cavity, pericardial sac. Peri literally means surrounds the heart, surrounding. Cardial means heart. Pericardial sac, pericardial cavity, either one. Inside the thoracic cavity, you also have two of these. This is where your lungs are. Your pleural cavity or your pleural sac. I always think of plural as more than one. You have two lung sacs, so that's how I remember that one. But you can see that the pericardial sac or the pericardial cavity is inside the thoracic cavity, and the thoracic cavity is inside the ventral cavity. So there's all these different cavities in cavities. They're not considered independent of each other because they hold the same fluids in between. And we'll get to that when we do respiratory. Not shown real well here. All right, let's see. I'm going to do the next one in white. Right below the diaphragm, you have this cavity that I'm outlining in white. It's right below the diaphragm. This one is the abdominopelvic cavity. And that includes two cavities, which are pretty easy to remember. You have your abdominal cavity, the largest cavity in the body. And your pelvic cavity. This is this light darker blue area. So what I can ask you here is name one cavity in the abdominal cavity. Who can name one? In the abdominal cavity. Stomach. Name one organ in the pelvic cavity. What is it? Urinary bladder. And both of those are in the abdominal pelvic cavity. Right? So it's one thing to think about. I may ask you, name the specific cavity that the kidneys are in. Cavity. What's the specific cavity that the kidneys are in? Not that low. They are in the abdominal cavity. Okay. So like this question, in which body cavities would you find the heart in? Here's the heart. I expect you to tell me three. What cavities is it in? Pericardial is the most specific one. Good. Thoracic is the next one. And ventral. So it's the ventral is the biggest overarching one, then thoracic, then the most specific is the pericardial cavity. Let's wrap it up with this one. Okay. The heart up here is blank to the diaphragm. That's that thin muscle is the diaphragm. What are you going to tell me? Superior. The diaphragm's an important one. The diaphragm is the border between the thoracic cavity and your abdominal pelvic cavity. It's kind of the barrier between the two, separating the two regions of those cavities. Jump into chapter 3. Cells. Okay, I'm going to ask you again. I know it was a while ago that I asked you. What are cells made of? Cells are made of more than one what? Two or more organelle. What is an organelle? It's made of many macromolecules, and they are actually all these little bits. And they all have different functions inside of a cell. They make that cell stay alive. Okay. They're made of many different macromolecules. So let's start. This is one activity that we got rid of post-COVID, but you would scrape your cheeks, you would stain the cell that are on the toothpick, put them under the microscope so you can observe them. These are animal cells, and you're observing the shape and what organelles we can see. For starters, cells, human cells do not have a cell wall. Animal cells do not have cell walls. They have specialized barriers that are called cell membranes. Okay, don't call them a cell wall. Inside the cell membrane, there's a few things we can see here, starting with the little dark, the dark things. Those are all the mitochondria of those cells. In the very center of the cell, you can see this very dark dominant feature. What is that one? The nucleus. Oh. And it's hard to envision, but all of this fluid inside, the actual fluid inside the cell, is the cyto. That literally means cell. Plasm. That literally means the fluid, the living fluid inside the cell. So the cytoplasm. And these are the major three parts that we can identify in the cell. What I need you to do is to be able to identify what the organelles are, and we're going to have to start talking about functions of these parts, because cells make tissues, tissues make organs, and organs make organ systems. That's going to be the topic of the entire course. I can show you images of different cells, and I expect you to be able to identify the organelles from many images, because they're going to have similar shapes and similar locations. Okay, so that's going to be something. So not only the shape, but identify where it's at, what certain things are trying to represent. So cells are made of two or more organelles. Here's a human, a stereotypical human animal cell. Okay, so let's start with identifying the functions of some of these. What is the big purple thing called again? What's the nucleus for? What is its role? What does it do? It holds the DNA. Okay, it holds it, it contains it, And it's responsible for eventually making the DNA, and the DNA will become RNA, which will come out to make the proteins which make cells. So you need to know what the DNA is. It is the blueprint of the cell. It is the blueprint of the cell, and it is maintained in the nucleus of the cell. This one is going to be a very prominent feature, the mitochondria. It's going to be drawn like a bean shape with squiggly lines in it almost all the time, because that's what they look like under the microscope. The mitochondria have multiple layers of cell membranes. That's what the squiggly lines represent, because they need that to do their function. What do mitochondria do? What are they making? And what is the energy of a cell? So you will not call it a powerhouse of a cell. You will not tell me it makes energy. You will be specific and tell me it creates ATP. That is what the mitochondria does. It makes, generates, produces, synthesizes, whatever you want to say, it makes the ATP. This one, pay close attention to this blue one that has this red dots. That is the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Before you ask, I will not accept RER. Rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay. So this one's important because it has these little red things. Do you see those red things? Those red things? Those little red dots? These little red dots are very important. They are called ribosomes. Ribosomes are crucial to life. What do ribosomes do? They make all the proteins in a cell. They're the ones that make the building blocks of life, of cells. They make proteins. The rough endoplasmic reticulum is rough because they hold on to ribosomes. That's what all those red dots are. Because they also make proteins, and they are rough because they have ribosomes on them. So you need to tell me that the ribosomes make proteins, the rough endoplasmic reticulum hold on to the ribosomes so they can also make proteins. So both of them make proteins. This is very different than the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Again, don't call it the SER. It is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. These don't make proteins. These make something else. What do they make? Lipids. Things like steroids, hormones, etc. The Golgi body is almost always going to look like this, where they're kind of these folds that come out to big lobules at the end. And then eventually they break off into vesicles. So this is the Golgi apparatus. You can call it the Golgi body, just Golgi, that's fine. It goes by multiple names. The Golgi is responsible for packaging and distributing the materials the cell makes. So it receives proteins from the rough endoplasmic reticulum. It receives lipids from the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, and then it decides where they go. Are they going to stay in the cell, Are they going to leave the cell? Are they going to become part of the cell? That is what the Golgi is deciding. Where to change them, where to send them, where to move them. Okay, we're going to do two more, and I'm going to leave the rest up to you because I think there's like a few more beyond this. Lysosome. Lysosomes. Does anybody know what lysosomes do? Think of the word Lysol. What does Lysol do? It kills bacteria. What do you think lysosomes do? They kill bacteria. They kill the bacteria that enters the cell and detoxify. So when too much certain chemicals get built up in there, they will help break them down. Peroxisomes are very similar to lysosomes, but these ones do not break down bacteria. They are responsible for detoxify only. They're filled with hydrogen peroxide, which helps break down certain toxins. That's why they're called peroxisome, because they're filled with hydrogen peroxide that your cell naturally makes. So for the cells, I expect you to understand the roles, the functions of many organelles, how they're arranged, starting with the plasma membrane. So remember, the plasma membrane is the barrier of the cell. That is important for you to understand. It's not a wall, it's a plasma membrane, and it makes the cell membrane. Plasma membranes make multiple membranes. One of them that they make is a cell membrane. So it makes cell membranes, which acts as the barriers of cells, and it makes the organelle membranes. So organelles also have a barrier that is made of a plasma membrane. There's some organelles that do not have plasma membranes. Keep that in mind. So they're made of a very critical molecule that I need you to be familiar with. They're made of a phospholipid molecule. Oh, Lord. And the phospholipid molecules make the phospholipid bilayer. What does that mean? Here is one, oh, wrong marker. Here is one phospholipid molecule. That's just one. Let me do a darker color. Here is one. That is one phospholipid molecule. And you can see that the way that they arrange themselves. So you will have one row, and you have your second row. And this is why they're called the phospholipid bilayer. Two layers of phospholipid molecules make up that membrane. Okay. And this phospholipid, again, here I'm going to surround one phospholipid. You can see what happens to the membrane, the phospholipid bilayer, is it gets inundated, so it has glycoproteins, glycolipids that are just embedded all throughout the membrane. These are very important structures so the cells can communicate, so the cells can identify themselves, so the cells can allow things to go in and out. Over here, this one, this big protein that I'm surrounding in yellow, you'll be able to see that it has a hole in it. So when there's a molecule on this side, It's going to allow that molecule to go right through. So these proteins decide what goes in, what goes out of the cell. And they're embedded in the phospholipid bilayer. By the way, this is your liquid mosaic that is made up, that makes up the plasma membranes. It's made up of phospholipid molecules, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates that all are arranged in a very unorganized pattern like this. But they make the cell and organelle membranes. When we look at the phospholipid bilayer, what is important is to understand that this red ball right here represents one phosphate group. That is a phosphate group. That is a phosphate chemical. That is important because that end is a hydrophobic end. The hydrophobic end means that it loves water. So that side is okay with mixing with water. Philic means love. Hydro means water. So this side is okay to mix with water. So water can touch this side, H2O, H2O. Water is okay with that side of the phospholipid molecule. This end has two tails, and these are made of lipids. That's why it's a phospholipid. This is a lipid, glycerol, phospholipid bilayer, phospholipid molecule. You've seen this before. What happens when you mix water and oil? What happens to that solution? They don't mix because lipid does not like water. So no water can come to this around that side. Okay. So when the phospholipid membrane arrange themselves like this, and by this, I mean over here in green, all of that side is hydrophilic. So that's okay with water. Only the red area is okay with water. So that means water can touch here, water can touch that area. However, all of the middle is hydrophobic. So water cannot enter that area. Water's not allowed in this region. The whole center region is hydrophobic. What is most of your body made of, folks? Water. So the brilliant thing, the way that this is arranged, is, for example, if you have sodium chloride that mixes in water outside of the cell, this is going to mix okay with the phosphate group, but as soon as it touches that lipid, it's going to get bounced back. So this is how the phospholipid makes a barrier. It doesn't allow things that mix with water to go through it. So it's going to keep everything on the outside out and everything on the inside in. It's just doing that because the center of the phospholipid bilayer is hydrophobic. The only way things can go in, things can go out, if there is a protein embedded right here, and that protein can decide what goes in, what goes out. So that's why in this image before, you can see that there's a ton of different proteins. This is a protein, this is a protein, this is part of a protein, even this little squiggly spiral thing. is a protein. They are deciding what gets to go in, what gets to go out. How does the inside, how does the outside communicate with itself? So the phospholipid membrane makes the barrier, and the proteins allow for communication to occur, for things to come in and out to occur of the cell. Plasma membranes. So what are you going to tell me? What does the mitochondria do? Creates ATP. ATP is the energy source for the cell. Which parts of the cell are lined with the plasma membrane? Say it again. So in this case, we need to understand what a plasma membrane is. So yes, a plasma membrane does have the glycoproteins, all that stuff. So what parts of the cell have a plasma membrane around them is what this is asking. So the nucleus, good. The mitochondria. So the endoplasmic reticulum, all of those are made of plasma membranes. And the whole cell wall, don't forget the whole not cell wall. I knew I was going to say that. The whole cell membrane, cell walls are in plants. That's why that's a bad word. So we have to remember that the plasma membrane surrounds, it makes that barrier, what separates the inside and outside of the cell. It makes the cell cell membrane. It surrounds what's inside and outside of the nucleus. It makes the nuclear membrane. It separates what's inside and outside of the mitochondria. It makes the mitochondrial membranes. It makes the membranes of the organelles and the cell. It's not just one or the other, it's all of them. Organelles have many functions. We've already talked about most of these. The most important one here is be able to identify this one. Which one's that one? Nucleus. And yes, the nucleus has holes in it. Many people don't realize that. Why it has holes in it? Because inside the nucleus is where DNA stay, where they're stored. During DNA replication and transcription translation, you'll learn about that in physio. It'll turn it to RNA, and the RNA needs to leave the nucleus so that it can make proteins inside of the cell. Very important for its shape, for it to be porous. It has holes in it. It holds the DNA inside. The mitochondria have two sets of membranes. So this outer membrane is one of them. And then it has an inner membrane. So it's two membranes. This one's called a double membrane organelle. Well, what this one does is this one brings in glucose. I'm going to put this because it's not just glucose, it's products of glucose and oxygen. This is why we breathe, is so you can get that oxygen to the mitochondria. And when glucose, oxygen work in their way into the mitochondria, what does the mitochondria do? It converts all of that to ATP. That is the energy source of the cell. You need to understand that. The Golgi body. The Golgi apparatus. Look, you can see parts of the Golgi leaving. They're going away. What does the Golgi do? What are you going to tell me? Those parts are leaving. Yeah, it's distributing all of the stuff. all the things the cell makes. But not only does it distribute them down here, and by down here, let's see what color do I want this thing. I want to go with green. Down over here, it's deciding where things are going to get to. So it packages the materials. So maybe this one is full of proteins. Maybe this one is full of hormones. Maybe this one is full of stuff that's going to become a lysosome. So it's going to decide where these things go, how these things are going to contribute to the cell. So not only does it distribute them, it also packages them. So it sorts and decides where they're going to go, what they're going to become. So here's a fun little, I think it's a fun little cartoon. I don't know if you guys will. Here are the ribosomes. What do the ribosomes do? They make what? Ribosomes. They make proteins. That's what they're doing. They made this pink protein right here. And they made that pink protein inside of this structure in blue. What is that structure in blue? The rough one? Very good. I'm going to cheat. I told you you couldn't do it, but I am. So it made them. Look at what the rough endoplasmic reticulum does with the proteins it makes. It's going to send, it's just going to pinch a little bit off, and it's going to send them to the Golgi. So now that protein that endoplasmic reticulum made is inside the Golgi. The Golgi is now going to be like, okay, I'm going to put this protein over here. I'm going to put this lipid over here. I'm going to put this protein over here. And it sorts them. Look, it's sorting them. Continues to sort them. Continues to sort them. This one's protein only. This one's protein and lipids. It has sorted them. And now they're going to pinch off and become different parts of the cell. This one pinches off and becomes a lysosome. This one pinches off and the products are released. Maybe they go to the blood. Maybe it's hormones that it made. What's really interesting, at least I think it's interesting, is this one pinches off and look, there's nothing inside. Nothing inside. All it's doing is taking that plasma membrane and moving it to the cell so it can make more plasma membrane. So it's making new organelles. It's making parts of the cell. It's sending things out of the cell. The Golgi body is distributing it throughout itself, throughout the cell. I didn't label that one, so let's label it. Cells have a bunch of structures to move. Okay, so cells, even though they're stationary in tissues, they have to be able to move stuff. This is the classic one that people understand very easily. What is that on that cell? What is that structure called that helps it move? Flagellum. The only one that's in the human cells that has a flagella is the sperm cell. Okay. Then there are some cells that have these long proteins. And they have motor proteins. So these, what these do is they whip. They move. They create a current right above them. So they move the fluids right above them. Those little hairs for current called cilia. and they move right above the cell just so that a current is created so it can move the fluids from one location to another. This happens in your brain, folks. The cerebral spinal fluid is moved by a bunch of cilia, so it moves that fluid throughout your brain, throughout your spinal cord. This happens when you breathe. This is what moves the mucus out of your lungs when you have to hawk a loogie. Cilia create currents, folks. This last one, there's these little, they're like nubbins. They are just small extensions of the cell. These are called villi. Oop, villi. VILLI. And all they are doing is instead of having a flat surface, they make the surface a lot. They make more surface. So what they really do is they increase surface area. The villi increase surface area. Why is that important? More surface area, the more you can absorb things. The more things will get sucked in. Your digestive tract has a ton of villi. Why? Because your digestive tract is trying to move those nutrients into the blood. So they're moving things. One moves substances. The villi will move product because they're increasing surface area. Like if it's a nutrient, more surface area, more absorption of nutrients. The cilia will create a current to move the fluids right above it. The flagellum will beat to move a cell. 3 different ways the cells have structures to move. I need you to understand this concept. And we're only going to do exocytosis, endocytosis. We're not going to talk about the specific ones. I think that's more for physio. Cells have to be able to get rid of stuff, to move stuff out of the cell. So if it was made by the rough ER, again, I'm cheating. It was sent to the Golgi. Now it's being released. It's a vesicle. Vesicle are these little containment membranes that hold on to things as it moves through the cell. You can see it's holding on to all of these green molecules. That vesicle will attach itself to the membrane and become part of the membrane of the cell itself. And when it does that, you can see that all of those things, all of the products they have are released. If it releases stuff, this is exocytosis. Exo means it exits the cell. This is the one that the cell uses to release items out of it. Exocytosis, exiting the cell. Endocytosis is the opposite. Endocytosis, what it does is those products are kind of drawn in to the membrane. And the membrane will kind of pinch itself and will move those things inside. So this now is holding products that is going to move into the cell. So maybe it grabbed salts that were outside. Maybe it grabbed hormones that were outside of the cells. And now it pinched the membrane to bring it inside. And endo means inside. Cytosis, moving things inside the cell. So moves in. Endocytosis versus exocytosis. This is happening at the cell membrane level. Cells have to attach themselves to other cells to make tissues. Because remember, tissues are two or more cells that work together. There are three major proteins that I want you to be familiar with that hold cells together. One of them is this one here. This is a protein that holds the cell together. Here is one cell membrane. So that's cell one. And here's the cell membrane of the other cell. Two cell membranes. And they're held together by this gap junction. And you need to understand why it's called the gap junction. That's because if there's something on this side, it could be sodium, it can go right through that gap to the other side. So even though those proteins are holding the cells together, there's a gap in that junction which allows the cells to exchange materials. This one allows the cell to exchange materials between two of them. This example up here, this is a tight junction. And what you will see here is that it literally fuses the two plasma membranes. It temporarily fuses them right here. So here they're fused, here they're fused, here they're fused. This is a tight junction. No material is exchanged between these, but this one will hold the cells together and it fuses the membranes together. So the membranes are inseparable. If the cells are separated, they are torn at the tight membranes. The last one are these little, they look like Ys, or they look like zippers. Those are called desmosomes. So these are proteins that extend a little part of them out so they are attached. Okay. This one holds the cells together, but this one is very weak. This one's almost designed to separate because sometimes the cells do have to separate from one another. This one is designed to do so. Okay. So the tight junction is the most strongest. Gap junction is the second strongest because it's fusing the membranes, even though that one's allowing materials to move through. And this one's the weakest. But they are three different methods that cells use to hold on to each other. We're going to call these compartments of water fluids because that's what they are. Okay. The yellow stuff, this stuff inside the cell, that is your intracellular fluid. And that fluid has a specific name. You're going to call it also the cytoplasm. That is the fluid inside of the cell. Everything outside of the cell is extracellular fluid. But here's the downside is there's a lot of extracellular fluids that we need to familiarize ourselves in this class. We're going to start with these two. The stuff in blue or purple, this is the fluid in between the cells. This is your interstitial fluids. in between cells, interstitial fluids, okay? You have the fluid that moves through your blood. What's the fluid in your blood called? Starts with a P. That is the plasma. Both of them are extracellular fluids, but there's different types of extracellular fluids. We're going to start with these three. We're going to learn about more fluids later. We're going to learn about lymphatic fluid, cerebrospinal fluids. We're going to learn about more fluids later. Let's start with these three. Okay, and why these three? Well, when oxygen is in the blood, it has to get to the cells. Oxygen has to travel to the interstitial fluid first before it can make its way into the cell. So the oxygen must travel from the plasma, which has gotten the oxygen when you breathe. It has to travel into the interstitial fluid and then the cell. And that is a concept that I need you to understand. It doesn't go from blood to cell. It has to move through the interstitial fluid first. What do you call the fluid in blue? Interstitial. What do you call the fluid that's in the bloodstream? What about the fluid that's actually inside the cell? So this is the one that's not an extra, it's intracellular fluid, okay? All right, so just know where they're at because these have to exchange materials with each other, like oxygen. Your cells need oxygen so that they can allow the mitochondria to make ATP. So all your cells, including the human bodies, to stay alive. A lot of the exchange, most of the exchange in the body is all going to happen through diffusion. Diffusion is a physical phenomenon that occurs passively. What does the word passive mean? So no energy is required. So it just happens just because of the properties of the molecules, of the atoms. So it's passive movement of molecules. Okay. And what's crazy to me is people used to study dropping solution dyes into water like this, and that was their PhDs back in the day. But people didn't know how this worked back then. So when you put a drop of dye, that is where they are very concentrated. And what molecules want to do is they actually want to create as much space between themselves and other things as possible. So what happens is that dye over time will spread out. And this is diffusion. Why? Molecules always want to go from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. This is diffusion in a nutshell. You want the molecules to go from an area of high concentration to low concentration. So when you put a drop of dye in, over time, that dye is going to spread out. It will continue to spread out until it is evenly distributed so that every area in that beaker is the same concentration. So it will equally spread out, and it started here in the center where the concentration was really high, and it's going to where the concentration was low. There's no dye there. So it's going to move, it's going to distribute, it's going to go from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. This is how your body will move. things throughout, like oxygen, because concentration gradients will drive diffusion. Again, from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration. This is diffusion. So when you breathe, the oxygen concentration is super high in your blood. It is really high inside the blood. The oxygen concentration is moderate inside the interstitial fluid. So it's going to move from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration, just through diffusion. Inside your cells, because the mitochondria are using all that oxygen, the concentration of oxygen is really, really low. So it's going to go from moderate levels of oxygen to really low levels of oxygen. So this is how oxygen will simply move from the blood plasma into the interstitial fluid, into the cytoplasm itself, all through diffusion, because the concentration is high here, it is moderate here, and it is very low side. So it's going to move through diffusion. No energy is required to get the oxygen into the cell. It's all passive diffusion. That is a very important concept. And the vice versa is true as well. What do I mean by that? Because your cells are using up oxygen, they're going to make a lot of CO2. That CO2 is going to diffuse into here where it's moderate. And the CO2 is relatively low in the blood. So it's going to move it into the blood so you can breathe it out of your system. So the movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide depend on diffusion because of where the concentration of their appropriate chemicals are highest and moving to the lower concentrated areas. Diffusion, folks. Okay.